The handcuffs were already on my wrists before I had the chance to say a single word. Not because I had done anything wrong, not because there was a warrant or a tip or even a reasonable suspicion, but because Officer Derek Malone looked at me, a 6'2" black man in a gray suit carrying a leather briefcase, and saw exactly what he wanted to see. What he couldn't have known was that the man he was dragging through Terminal C toward a back office had sentenced 3 federal agents to prison in the past 18 months alone. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Marcus Ellison. I am 53 years old, and for the past 11 years, I have served as a United States federal judge in the Southern District of Illinois. I say this not to impress anyone, and certainly not to suggest that only men of a certain title deserve to be treated with basic human dignity. Every single person in that airport deserved what I deserved that morning. I say it because it matters to what happened next. March 4th started the way most of my mornings do. I was up at 5:15, a habit my wife Patricia has spent 26 years trying to cure me of. I made coffee in the green ceramic mug my daughter sent me from Portland, and I stood at the kitchen window watching the February gray light take hold of the yard. The oak tree my father helped me plant when we first moved into this house was finally starting to bud. I remember thinking spring would come early this year. Patricia was still asleep when I kissed her forehead. She stirred and murmured, without fully waking, "Don't argue with anyone on the plane." It was a joke we had. I told her I wouldn't. The airport at 6 in the morning was its usual controlled chaos. Pre-check, shoes on, laptop in the bag, I was through security and at my gate with time to spare. I opened my notes for the judicial conference in Washington. 3 new agenda items, 2 of them touching on areas I'd been watching carefully: sentencing reform and the expanding jurisdiction of immigration enforcement within domestic transit hubs. The fluorescent lights hummed. The gate smelled of coffee and jet exhaust. I settled in and got to work. I was deep in those notes when I first noticed him. He was stationed near the gate entrance, not the TSA checkpoint, but the actual boarding area, in a dark green ICE uniform. He was young, maybe 28, with a broad face and close-cut blonde hair, and he was scanning the waiting area with the expression of a man who has already decided something before seeing anything worth deciding about. I noticed him the way my father taught me to notice certain things, quietly, without reacting, without giving anything away. He walked past me once, then again. On the 3rd pass, he stopped. "Sir." The word came out flat and hard, the way certain people use "sir" to mean the opposite of respect. "Can I see some ID?" I looked up from my notes and kept my hands visible, a habit installed in me at 14 years old, learned from a father who had learned it the hard way in Memphis in 1971. I closed my folder slowly. "May I ask what this is regarding?" I said. Something flashed across his face. Irritation, or perhaps surprise that I'd asked at all. "Routine check. ID, please." Around us, travelers glanced over and then looked away. Nobody intervened. Nobody ever does in the first 30 seconds, when it still looks like it might be nothing. I reached into my breast pocket and produced my federal judicial identification, a credential bearing my photograph, my title, and a gold federal seal. I have carried it for 11 years, without ever needing to use it the way I was about to use it now. I held it out to him. He took it. I watched his face with the same attention I give witnesses on the stand. I have spent 11 years watching faces for the precise moment when a person processes something they do not want to be true. I watched it happen in real time. His jaw tightened, his eyes moved from the credential to my face. And there was a beat, barely half a second, where everything could have gone differently. He handed it back to me. "I'm going to need you to come with me," he said. The cold that moved through me then was older than fear. My grandfather had described it once. The feeling of knowing exactly what is happening, knowing it is wrong, and knowing the wrong thing will happen anyway, unless you are very careful about every word and every movement in the next 60 seconds. My hands stayed still on my knees. My voice stayed level. "On what basis?" I asked. "Sir, I'm not going to ask again." And then he put his hand on my arm. I stood. Not because I was complying, but because I understood that remaining seated while he attempted to pull me upright would only give him more tools to use against me. I picked up my briefcase and walked with him toward the service corridor at the far end of the gate. 11 faces in the waiting area watched us go. Not a single one of them said a word. The room he brought me to was small and windowless. A metal table, 2 chairs, a camera mounted in the upper corner. It smelled of bleach and stale coffee. He closed the door behind us and crossed his arms. "We've had a report," he said, "of a suspicious individual matching your description traveling with falsified documentation." "A report from whom?" I said. He didn't answer. I kept my voice even. "Officer Malone, I have shown you a valid federal judicial credential. I am a sitting United States federal judge traveling to an official conference in Washington. I want the specific legal basis for this detention, and I want it now." He leaned against the wall with the comfortable contempt of a man who has never once in his life been held accountable for anything. "That credential could be fake," he said. Something inside me went very quiet, not peaceful, but quiet the way a courtroom goes silent before a verdict everyone already knows. I had tried 47 cases on the bench. In the past 18 months alone, I had sentenced 3 law enforcement officers, 2 from CBP, 1 from a neighboring ICE field office, for civil rights violations and falsifying arrest reports. The specific irony of where I was sitting at this moment was not lost on me in the slightest. "I would like to make a phone call," I said. "You'll make one when I decide you can." He slid a form across the table. "Full name, date of birth, country of origin." "Country of origin," I repeated, very quietly. "Standard procedure," he said. He met my eyes without flinching. What Malone didn't know, couldn't know, was that I was not alone. My law clerk, James, 26 years old and constitutionally incapable of being more than 20 feet from his phone, had been sitting 3 rows behind me at the gate, traveling on a separate ticket to the same conference. I had not looked at him when Malone approached me. But in my peripheral vision, as Malone's hand closed on my arm, I had seen James stand up from his seat. I had seen him put his phone to his ear. And I had seen, in the half-second before the corridor door closed behind us, that his face had gone the careful, focused blank of someone who has just understood exactly what he is looking at and exactly what he needs to do about it. The fluorescent light buzzed above us. Outside the door, muffled gate announcements drifted through the wall. My flight boarded in 24 minutes. I thought of the green mug I'd left on the seat at the gate. I thought of the oak tree in my yard, just beginning to bud. I thought of Patricia's voice, half asleep in the dark. "Don't argue with anyone on the plane." I did not fill out the form. I folded my hands on the table and I waited. The wait lasted 4 minutes. I know because I watched the second hand on the wall clock above Malone's head complete 4 full rotations. He stood with his arms crossed, checking his phone twice, projecting the boredom of a man who does this often enough that it no longer requires his full attention. That boredom, I thought, was the most honest thing about him. The knock came on the 4th minute exactly. Malone opened the door. An airport operations manager stood in the corridor, and behind her, I saw it before he did, was James. And beside James stood a man I recognized immediately. Richard Carr, Deputy Director of the Chicago Field Office of the Department of Homeland Security. Richard and I had sat on a federal oversight panel together 2 years prior. He was not a man who drove to O'Hare at 6 in the morning for nothing. "Derek Malone," Carr said, stepping past the woman into the doorway. His voice was pleasant, almost conversational. "Step outside with me, please." Malone's arms dropped from his chest. Something cracked in his face, not panic yet, but the first fracture in a wall before the whole thing comes down. "Sir, I have a detainee under—" "Step outside with me," Carr said again, in exactly the same tone. Not louder, not harder, just the same. The door stayed open. In the corridor, I could see a second DHS officer, an airport legal representative clutching a lanyard with both hands, and James, holding his phone, wearing the expression of someone who has just personally stopped a train. He caught my eye and gave one tight nod. Malone's voice came through the open doorway, clipped and defensive. The credential appeared suspicious. I followed standard protocol. "The credential," Carr said, "belongs to Judge Marcus Ellison, Southern District of Illinois. Appointed by the President, confirmed by the Senate, 11 years on the federal bench." A pause that lasted exactly as long as it needed to. "You detained a sitting federal judge, Derek, without cause, on camera, in front of 47 witnesses." The silence that followed was the kind my grandfather had described to me once. The silence in which you can hear a man's certainty leave him, like air going slowly out of something that has been punctured. I stood up from the table, picked up my briefcase, and walked out of the room. In the corridor, Richard Carr shook my hand. His grip was firm, and his expression carried the specific, professional apology of a man who understands that an apology, however sincere, is inadequate to the situation. "Marcus, I am deeply sorry." "Thank you for coming, Richard," I said. My voice was steady. I had made it steady the way you make a fist, deliberately, with effort. "I'll want a full incident report. Every word, every timestamp, every camera angle. You'll have it before noon." I missed my flight. While James rebooked us at the counter, still running on the adrenaline that had carried him through the past 40 minutes, I sat in a chair near the gate and opened my notebook. I began writing by hand. Time of initial approach, the exact wording of each exchange, the 6 seconds during which Malone had reviewed my credential and made his choice. I wrote everything down before any of it could soften in memory. I had learned, in 20 years of courtrooms, that the most effective thing a person can do with a legitimate grievance is to document it completely, file it correctly, and let the machinery work. Noise is satisfying. Precision is lethal. James appeared with 2 coffees and sat down across from me. "Are you all right?" he asked. I thought about it, honestly. My shoulders still held the pressure of Malone's grip. The form he'd slid across the table, country of origin, sat in the back of my mind like a splinter that hadn't been removed. "I'm fine," I said. "You did well today." He looked down at his cup. "I just made some calls." "That's exactly what well looks like," I said. That night, in my hotel room in Washington, I called Patricia and told her everything. There was a long silence when I finished. Patricia does not cry easily. She is, in most respects, more formidable than I am. But I heard something in her breathing, I recognized. When she spoke, her voice was even and deliberate in the way that means she is keeping it that way, by force. "What are you going to do?" she said. "What I always do. The right thing, the right way, at the right time. Marcus. Just my name, with 26 years of weight behind it." "I know," I said. "I know." 6 weeks after March 4th, Officer Derek Malone was placed on administrative leave, pending a formal investigation by the DHS Office of Inspector General. The investigation was triggered by 3 things: my incident report, the terminal footage James had formally requested within 2 hours of the event, and this was the part that came out later, the part that explained everything about his practiced confidence, the discovery of 4 prior complaints against Malone filed over 19 months by travelers who were Black or Latino. Not one of those complaints had resulted in any disciplinary action whatsoever. 4 complaints, 19 months, 0 consequences. The 5th was different. At the OIG hearing, Malone's attorney argued that the detention had been based on a legitimate tip and that his client had followed standard procedure throughout. The footage told a different story. It showed, with 6 seconds of absolute clarity, the moment Malone reviewed my federal judicial credential, recognized exactly what it was, and chose to proceed anyway. 6 seconds. The difference between an honest mistake and a deliberate decision is precisely that long, and the camera had caught every one of them. Malone was terminated 8 weeks after the hearing. The 4 prior complainants were formally notified and their records cleared. 3 of them filed civil suits. I was asked whether I intended to do the same. I decided against it, and I said so in a public statement 12 sentences long. The last sentence read, "The appropriate outcome of this incident is not recognition of the exception, but correction of the rule." I don't know if Derek Malone, in whatever room he occupies now, has examined what he did and genuinely understood it. I have my doubts. But I know that 4 other complaints are no longer buried. I know that a process which had been running smoothly for 19 months, the process of doing this to people and facing nothing for it, has stopped running. 3 months after March 4th, on a Thursday morning, I stood at the kitchen window with the green ceramic mug and watched the oak tree in the yard. It was fully in leaf now. Deep, heavy summer green, the kind that makes you feel the weight of the whole season pressing down beautifully on everything at once. Patricia came downstairs and stood beside me without speaking for a moment. "You're up early again?" she said. "Always," I said. She leaned her head briefly against my shoulder. On the counter behind us, my briefcase sat ready for the day. New lock, same case, same credential inside it. I picked up the green mug and finished my coffee. For the first time in a long time, it did not taste bitter at all. It tasted like exactly what it was: